Right. I think we will naturally see a bit of a drop off now that the coffees are out of the way and most of the sessions are. But for those of you who are here, we hope to have an interesting session with maybe even a little bit of friction. I hope it's always good to create a bit of friction, at least at the end of the day. I'm going to let all the panelists introduce themselves, and particularly those of them from the industry side, which is, I think, on my right. Also have a slide each, I think, on your work, which Irfan will bring up. But before I do that, let me try and kind of place this session in context. In the spirit of creating friction and also to check whether you're listening, I want to make this session about everything that the rest of the day was not about. So today was about large model safety workshop. I don't know how many are listening. But this session probably is not going to be about large model safety. And the simple reason is that, at least for me personally, I had something called the AI Verify Foundation, which looks at safety and risk in the context of deployment of AI in real world applications. So some of the applications we're looking at right now is, for example, one of our hospitals using an LLM to summarize a colonoscopy report and a histopathology report to create a third recommendation. Daniel, this is close to your space. Now, do I really worry if that is spewing racist nonsense? It's not great, but I'm actually not that worried. What am I worried about? I'm worried about whether well, first of all, whether it works, and secondly, whether some malicious actor inside the system could somehow tweak the model so that it's systematically missing out something, for example. Or I could worry about bias, but the kind of bias I might worry about is it more accurate for one group than others, right? So the reason I take that example is, as I speak, and we have 200 members in our foundation, companies from across industries. Many of them are deploying LLMs, but surprisingly, I don't hear too many of them worrying as much about foundation level risks. What I would like to do with today's panel, which has on my right folks from industry, my left folks from research, academia, etc., is really focus on two things. First, is there a gap, or is it just me not hearing about it? And if there is a gap, what might be the reason? Why is it that the folks on the right don't seem to care about, I'm exaggerating, don't seem to care about all the stuff around frontier risk? And if there is a good reason for that, what can we do to make both sides more aware of each other, but also more importantly, is there some of the research that's been talked about since morning that might be applicable and valuable also? So that's what we're trying to do. With that, I'm going to stop and let the folks on my right maybe start with industry, because I think folks have met the academic folks. So please introduce yourself, and Irfan, where are you? I think we'll bring each person's slide up as they come. So as you introduce, your slide will come as well. Please go ahead.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex. I am actually a senior principal data scientist in this ST Engineering under the division of Deep Brain. Okay, Deep Brain Center of Excellence. As you can see, the logo on the top left, that's my logo. Okay, so as technology evolves, right? So what we do is essentially we build a lot of software applications for a lot of the agencies, as some of you might know. And in the recent years, I've seen a rise in the interest for LLMs, right, to have intelligence applications to do a lot of things, right, starting from speech to text, all right, and then to automated form filling, Q&A, and so on and so forth, right. So what we do in Deep Brain, right? We have this. We are centers specialized on using all these AI tools, all right? These LLM tools, and we are in the midst of building a product, right? To scale to our many applications. So that product is actually the Merlin over there, all right? And Agile Trust. Now, I just want to showcase about 3 different applications here. So one, which is generally making up a large portfolio of us, is the safety hotline. Okay, so you have safety hotline applications whereby the person will call regarding an incident, and this we apply. We have this feature in domains such as homeland security, military, and so on. So it's a huge range of it. And then we develop chatbots as well for certain other industries, right? Okay. And then, of course, then we talk about the age-old trust, right? The deepfake detection, all right? Now, with regards to AI safety, I think it is what has been mentioned. I mean, what most people know, right? The very harsh words, difficult words are not being generated or being, even when the caller say harsh words, right? Sometimes the caller can be very angry and then they score us, you know. So we try to make sure that those things get translated into the application itself. All right. And so same for the chatbot, we try not to have bad things generated from the chatbot. So we use things like guardrails. And then of course the third one, which is the application that we have, age-old trust. That one is one of our most promising product, which we have launched, right? It's basically be able to detect deepfake videos, all right, and telling us whether that is fake or not. All right, so that is what primarily my division, Deep Brain, is doing. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Andy. I didn't prepare a slide, so you have to look at me. Yeah, sorry. So I'm from Synapse, right? And Synapse is the public healthcare tech partner for MOH and our healthcare systems. So I support people like, Daniel here. So what we do is we are the tech partner to bring technology enablers to help multiply the effect of what we can do in healthcare so as to improve our population's life, right, in general. So target is to get care to the right person, right place, and right time so that, everybody can live longer and have happier life. So I'm the Chief Data Officer, and I'm also a Director of Data Analytics and AI. Okay, I don't want to talk about Chief Data Officer side, but the work that we do with our clusters primarily is to provide the technical specialization in the areas of infrastructure relating to AI platforms, as well as the capabilities to help them implement and scale their use cases to bring value for not just their organization, but to the patients as well. Right. So we are agnostic about the technology, to be honest. Right. I have a small group of data scientists, about 40, right? And very little part of our work is on research, probably about 10%, right? Most of the work we do is to explore how we can understand the technology, to work together with our stakeholders to apply it. And then what we do is then try out different ways to optimize it in hopes to scale it for all the public healthcare stakeholders in Singapore. So that's what we do here. Thanks.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Daniel. Similarly, I do not have slides. You see the common patterns from the healthcare people. We are just lazy. I am a MD PhD and retina surgeon in practice. More and more, I'm not so sure which is my day job and which is my night job now. I started my PhD time on from the optical engineering and the AI computer science, and I'm a big fan of Joshua. I know he's not here, but just going to do a shout out. A lot of my work in my early career actually started with pixel-based convolutional neural net. And of course, we pivoted our lab for the last 2.5 years to large language models, vision language models, and multimodals. And I currently direct the AI office in SingHealth, which is by far the largest healthcare cluster in Singapore. I am a adjunct faculty in Stanford. As well. So I think I was here from the very start of the day. Rarely I spend a lot of time in conference, but I think large model safety workshop, I think safety in the healthcare space is paramount. The one thing that we want to do for patients is to protect them and do no harm, right? This is what every single medical student who went through the medical school has to sign the oath, right? That is a Hippocratic oath that we actually all have to sign. And if you look at the healthcare applications in AI, it could largely be divided to software as a medical device and software as a non-medical device. So a lot of we can talk a bit more about what we do in SingHealth on organization, summarization, the task, that's considered very low risk. And the healthcare, the allied health professionals related stuff, like we just recently had a meeting with Andy's team to look at clinical audit, helping the, our finance team, operation team, the physiotherapist team. So this is all considered non-healthcare related, the medically related, but training a reasoning model, training a clinical decision support tool, training a fully autonomous AI models to triage, to diagnose, to predict, and to treat patients. This is all considered as software as a medical device. And all of these is all related to what we do in healthcare, and happy to share more later. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, hi, I'm Chris Manning. Mainly do natural language processing at Stanford University, and I guess I can keep it brief since we've already done intros and talked.
Hi, I'm Gagandeep Singh. I'm an assistant professor from UIUC. My research is at the intersection of formal methods and machine learning. So a lot of our work is related to giving formal guarantees on the safety of different kind of AI models. And I in the beginning did talk about how we can also give it for large language models. Happy to have this discussion forward.
Hi, I'm Yang Zhang, and I'm a faculty member at the CISPA Helmholtz Center for Information Security in Germany. So my research is mainly on AI security or safety. Nowadays, I also work a little bit on the online memes, etc.
So maybe starting with the industry side, Daniel and Andy, be the first question to both of you. Before we get into the healthcare domain, I assume you're both using generative AI in some form as a personal productivity tool or just to look up stuff, etc. As you think about when you do that, and then I guess, Daniel, in your situation, as you think about comparing that with some of the potential clinical applications, how does your perspective on risk change between these two? Like when you're using it yourself to do something, research, which may have no further impact versus, okay, it's going to be used, like you said, to diagnose, to recommend, etc.
Yeah, so it comes down to like the risk category, right? I mean, in any countries around the world, including Singapore, when AI tool is built to deliver patients' care. So we would then categorize them into low risk, intermediate, and high risk, right? So the low risk ones is something that what you has just alluded to. Me checking on ChatGPT to look at, hey, what is the top 5, the GLP-1 drugs, that I can take a look and then to share with my patients, right? Because, this is some of the information that's already been out there that the Gen AI engines, irrespective of which company, is doing really well right now. But the moment that this information comes through the doctor's brain and to actually then comes down to the decision-making steps, this is when you have to then think, is this information correct? So this is where we call this as a human in the loop, the decision-making, the process. And then you have to then supplement it with other diagnostics too, right? your physical examinations, investigations, biomarkers, and etc. So I think this is where I think for the AI education tool is considered very low risk. Right now, I think this is still a rather gray area where the regulators will say, hey, if I'm using AI to educate myself, is that considered as medical tool? On the other hand, right now, if I'm building the AI agents to now providing patients education, so physician education versus patient education, just to going back to your question, is viewed very differently, right? Patient doesn't undergo like multi-years of the medical training, so we cannot assume that they have the expertise, the knowledge to kind of help them or guide them to make the sound or informed decision. So then the risk category suddenly actually escalate by 10 times or more. And depending on the conditions itself, whether it's life-threatening conditions or site-threatening conditions in the space that I do versus otherwise, then that is how we actually then look at where this AI tool has to be in terms of risk. The categorization has to be placed in. And the one last thing is whether this tool is going to be fully automated versus 100% assistive. FDA, HSA in Singapore would again have a different the risk category on that. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 points between physician patients, and with patient, is it automated or is it assistive? Yeah.
Maybe Daniel, just staying on so if you take that second example, so you talked about different categories. Now let's look at the higher risk category, which is a patient looking up and saying, hey, I've got flashes in my eye. Do I need to worry about it, etc.? As you think about, you said you were here since the morning, or at least if you've been aware of the kinds of research, are you, in that particular situation, is your main concern really about accuracy or some of the other broader constraints or considerations around large model safety, such as alignment or misalignment rather, or deception or all of that? Does that even come into your mind as you think about this?
Yeah, great questions, right? When in healthcare settings, at least, when we look at safety, right, we categorize into 3 big buckets. One is accuracy, like exactly what you said, clinical accuracy, right? So it's your model, what's your AUC, what is your F1 score, what's your sensitivity, specificity, right? I mean, classification model, right? Narrow AI versus like multi-class, multi-labels. There's one big class, right? Clinical accuracy, clinical safety. We talked a lot about technical safety this morning, right? But there's a big portion that we haven't quite talked about this morning, which is the ethical safety. How ethical it is, right? So basically, AI model biases. How when you actually deliver care, I give you an example. If an AI model says you have 3 months more to live, and based on the evidence I can crawl in the world, and you shouldn't treat the patients, who are you in terms of the AI to tell us that these patients shouldn't have treatment versus these patients should be treated aggressively, but how do you then balance that with dignity to live and, so those are the things that the ethical part would then start coming to play when you actually talk about not just the clinical and technical, but also ethically, how do you want the patients to receive their care in the healthcare space here?
Maybe staying on healthcare, Andy, anything to add to basically the same themes?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. Maybe give some context. Prompt context window, right? So I think in generally we classify the AI into 3 categories, right? Clinical, which is medical, like what Dan talked about. Then we talk about clinical ops, related but not directly related, right? And the last one is others, everything else, right? So you think about it, it kind of risk categorize the kind of work that an effort that we want to do in these kind of areas. And for us, the question of safety has been something that we have been looking at for AI for a very long time. Just that in LLM, we do look at it from a different perspective, right? We deployed Selena, right? Used by clinicians to look at the iris to detect certain conditions, right? And they are used by clinicians. And then the answer is provided back to the patients after they have analyzed and diagnosed, right? We have done readmission risk, high risk of readmission in 1 year model. And we have done that and we have passed it to the nurses, the clinicians on the ground to identify patients high risk so that they can take more proactive actions, right? So all this AI work, generally safety is important, how you design it, how you make sure it's not biased, etc., right? But all this goes on the back end of the system where a professional takes it on and the professional brings it to the patient with the right context and with the right skill sets that they have. Now, LLM is a bit different in 2 ways. Number one, the traditional AI ML is that you bring the model to the data, right? I need to bring my different libraries in and I train based on the data that I have. Now, in the LLM world, we have to bring the data to the model because the LLM is so big. No point I host all the giant models just to do something, right? So I think that part of it, to me, from a technical perspective, infrastructure, data perspective, that is a risk area that we need to manage, right? And we have done quite a lot of things together with partners, including AIDX, STE, on how we can design an architecture to make sure that data is safe. We have built a public healthcare Gen AI platform that we give access to all our 90,000 users so that they can use their data in a safe environment to interact with LM, right? I think that's something that we have done. Rather than they just copy and paste the data, go to ChatGPT, put everything there, and then the patient data suddenly get flagged out somewhere, I think it would be shocking. But we have made arrangements to make sure it's protected, etc., from day one, and we continue to monitor it and keep it safe, right? I think that's number one. Number two is that now the same question of, are you at risk of readmission? A doctor can ask it. A patient can also ask it, right? And the way the patient asks and the way the doctor asks could be totally different, but the answer that comes back, there will always be an answer that comes back. And the question now is, how will a person with less knowledge take this information and go? I think that's the higher risk area, right? Which is the literacy, understanding, and how people apply it, right? It's got nothing to do with the technology, right? The LLM is just going to sit there and answer all your questions. But I think a lot depends on how we train up the people who use it, how we design it. But it's going to be an open risk. It's not possible to control all the questions. I think previously there was an example of, can I make a bomb, right? But if I'm in the police, I'm MHA, I'm bomb diffuser, I want to identify, ingredients that can make a home bomb. You mean I can't use it? Okay, technically speaking, you can't, right? Of course, you can make separate arrangements, but there are people, the 1%, who really need to do that to do good, right? Now, the question is, how do we manage that as a whole, right? This is something that we are working with different parties to try to figure out as well. Yeah.
Maybe on that note, Alex, maybe you can talk about your work on, I think your applications are not in one industry alone, in multiple areas. And one of the things you think about is the contextualization of risk. So maybe you can talk a bit more.
Yes. Okay. So contextualization is a very big thing. Okay, as we develop applications for a lot of different clients. Okay. So and contextualization doesn't just whether the application is safe or not, or right or wrong, depends on the context, right? So catching on what Andy said just now, making a bomb. Let's say if it's anybody, that'll be wrong. But if let's say it's a home affairs, I want bomb diffuser squad, I want to know how to make a bomb, right? Then, or rather, I want to know how to diffuse certain types of bomb. Then I need to know the information. So the context is very different, right? So for example, for one of us, our case is the PII, right? Personal identifiable information. So for most of our applications, we shouldn't reveal, right, the full NRIC of the person, right? So usually only the last 4 digits. Yeah. So, but for some applications which is like investigative, right? I think you need the whole NRIC number. So again, that depends. And then also we also have hospital applications. So on the subject of bias, fairness, right? When it comes to hospitals, when it comes to bed allocation, then there's a question about fairness and all these kind of things. But let's say if I develop an application for marketing, which is targeted at certain demographics, how can you say it's unfair? Because I'm already targeting certain demographics. So the context is very important. And in that regard, sometimes it's not a model issue, right? It's actually a policy issue. So how actually we deal with that, right? Going back to the use case, going back to the client, verifying the client is very important, the policy on which the application is used for, right? And that's a challenging part in that in an application, sometimes there may not just be one type of a user, right? There could be multiple types of user, multiple levels of users. And then each different level of user, each different group of user you want to use the application in different ways. So in that's a subcontext within the context. So, we got to sort that out. And sometimes the role-based access is very important in that regard. So always go back to the client, always go back to the policies, all right, and check with them. Yeah.
So maybe I'll pause this side of the conversation and come to my left side. But just before that, for you and for the room here, many of whom are safety researchers, let me just try and synthesize a few of the points I heard, right? So what does use of AI in the context of not as a general purpose model, but using traditional generative AI inside in industries, inside a hospital, inside a bank, inside a police department, what does that entail? Well, what we heard is, first of all, there are different layers of risk. And so in many instances, particularly with human intervention, wherever the risk is genuinely high, particularly with human intervention still in the loop, the first question for me would be whether some of the systemic risks we've been worrying about at a large model level, are they even applicable? Because the chances of the model going rogue is much lower. So that's one part. And so that's that. Yeah. So that's one side of the question. The second thing is, even if you look at, let's say, an end user facing chatbot, like the medical health hub chatbot, which is the one that you can go to get advice on medical conditions. Yeah, this is customer facing. So there are categories of danger I worry about, but they are not really about chemical weapons and child safety and all of that. They're probably about vaccine, denial, or they're about some other category. So that's the context point, which is, so both of these points are important. One is that a lot of, at least how I view large model safety research, has been focusing on ever advanced capabilities of a model acting on its own, whereas actually at this point, the rest of the world, those who are not in that world, are not even thinking of them using, and maybe they are being naive about it, but that's one. The second thing is, even when some of the same considerations work, the techniques might be the same, but the categories of risk an individual application is worried about is different. So taking these 2 points, maybe the first question I'll have, is for this side, it would be, the first question would be, are we, and I'm counting myself on the industry side now, are we being naive in not looking at much bigger risks? Is it that actually, what are you worrying about these minor things? Actually, you should be worried. So that's my first intentionally provocative question. Is industry being naive by not worrying about these large risks?
No, I think industry is not being naive. Obviously thinking about the future of humanity is important, and wondering about what happens when you've got large models connected directly to tool use in agentic circumstances, that's worth thinking about. But in most of the applications that are actually being deployed, it's much more limited context of the use of large language models. And I think that concerns about AIs going rogue just isn't really relevant. Though I think some of the other areas that were discussed a bit are still very much relevant.
Yeah. Any thoughts from yourself? That might be everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think like the industry is being naive. I think in academia sometimes we have the tendency to go for the hardest problems that we can think of, not necessarily the ones that are practically relevant, right? So one thing I want to bring up here is, like, I think there was a lot of discussion about risk, etc. The problem is that these days you read a lot of paper, even like large model safety, and then the paper title claims that the LLM can do this or cannot do this. And I read the full paper and then I don't know what the paper is about, because there is kind of like no rigorous definition of what capability you are imagining. So I'm like very much, for me, it's like I'm very much interested in like working with stakeholders to formalize or define these terms more rigorously. Like you are talking about this context-based properties, right? So that kind of rigorousness is also important if you are thinking about building some kind of governance model or transparency. So if I don't have a very rigorous definition of the safety properties I want and the kind of risk I want to tolerate, how would I enforce it, right? I have worked on and I have contributed to ISO panels where they were trying to define AI robustness. Well, robustness you can define, but there are thresholds like how much robustness you want, how much you don't want. If you don't have those definitions and they are maybe in your head or something, right? If the model in the wild violates those properties, who is going to enforce it? You cannot, because you have never rigorously defined. I can always make a case that model is behaving as it should be. So I think this is a very important consideration if we are talking about, and maybe not much explored when we get into this kind of race of like, yeah, uncovering new capabilities of these models, right? So just defining these properties in the context of the applications you are imagining, and then maybe giving some rigorous guarantees, checking the risks that you can have from the models, and then calibrating your models accordingly, I think can be a good way to go about it.
Maybe Yang, no, please take the mic. I'm going to tweak that question slightly for you. You're actually in a happy mix because the one area that industry does care quite a bit about at the frontier is safety and security, and particularly, sorry, not safety, security in particular, and data leakage. Personally, as an ex-chief data officer at a bank myself, I think it's because we don't understand these risks very well. So we actually want some very wise people, much wiser than us, to think about it. What would be your take on this? I mean, to what extent do you see the research you do at the cutting edge on, model-related security also applicable in downstream applications?
So in general, so right now, most of the academic research on large model safety is mainly, I think it's not really the real world risk, it's more like a red teaming. So, so the concrete damage, let's say your model says something offensive or teach you how to make a bomb. I don't believe there are many people actually using a model to tell you how to make a bomb or say something offensive. So, there are also always people on the internet say something like this. It's more like a red teaming in the sense that, the large companies like OpenAI, they are worried about the PR. Let's say if a model says something inappropriate, it's a PR disaster.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, it has been evolved so many months or 2 or 3 years. I think people care about this less and less. So, I mean, in security research, if you want a company to really care about what the academic research is, the easiest way is, let's say, something really bad happened in this domain in the real world. Yeah. So, but most cases it's not happening. So, to fully realize the risks, I think that it's also connected to say what the model actually can do. So let's say if you use a model to build the agent, and the agent, let's say, book you a plane ticket, it turns out that they transfer all your money to a different account. So those kind of risks are more concrete, and in the real world or threat modeling wise, this is more obvious. So we will care about them. Right now, I think we're still in the red teaming phase, and that's why probably the companies actually do not pay that much attention. Instead, they more mainly focus on, let's say, whether my training data can be leaked or other things. But I think at some point with the quick development of the agent, or you build the AI or integrate the AI in many data applications, more and more such risks will happen, and then we probably will start again regarding different kind of risks. But in general, I do agree that safety is a very broad term. It's basically impossible to define, or also security actually. So it's still a long way to go, but I guess that still, so we need to go application by application, domain by domain, and some point we may have a solution, I guess.
And Andy, you have a point. Just to summarize what I heard from here, and then I'll come back to you, because I was actually going to give the mic to you anyway. So what I heard from this side is no industry is not being naive in worrying about what it's worrying about today. But as the progress on the models continue, it is wise to think of where things might go. So I guess academia and research is also right in doing what it's doing, which is to focus on that. Now, I think what Andy is likely to say, but please tell me if otherwise, is actually there are golden means where some of the work that research is doing might already be helpful. But I'm anticipating. Please go ahead.
Oh, no, I think the work
good.
that you guys are doing are very important. Right?
Yeah.
I think what is clear to us is that it's still an evolving area, right? I mean, maybe I give an example. If you look at a car, right, we need to know what is the important specifications and what are the limits it can perform with, right? And how to test to make sure that it's safe, right? So we have the NCAP 5-star system, right? So we need to determine things like that. But this is like a flying car. So we do need the research to determine what is the maximum, how far can you fly, how high can you fly, what temperature will it, stop working, etc., etc., and how can you, abuse it, right? But for us, is we are thinking about how to drive it, how to come up with policies to manage it, what's the speed limit, red light, green light, all the traffic lights, etc., right? And I think that is the part that I think we understand, but we know that it's still growing. We're not going to commit to it because when ChatGPT came out with the first model, we thought that's it. Then a few months later, another version came out, right? Then a few months later, Claude came out. Then after that, DeepSeek came out. Then we just say, forget it. Let's not put our eggs in one basket. We will continue to move and look at it at a stage where we become slightly more mature. Then we can put in all the research together and then have a clear position on how we apply that, Yeah.
And maybe on that, if I may, Daniel, if you can take the mic. I want to pair up Daniel and Gagandeep on one particular point. So my background, as I mentioned, is in banking. And in banking, surprisingly, or maybe not, despite it being very risk averse, it's been used to working with probabilities for a very long time. You do take very, very big decisions with certain statistical guarantees. So I guess the reason I wanted to bring you in, Daniel, is imagine a clinical use case for an LLM where it's not accepted today because it's not considered reliable enough. Now imagine some of Gagandeep's work around mathematical guarantees coming in and genuinely provable guarantees that actually, yes, it will make errors, but the error will be within this range. Instead of thinking about risk, does that actually improve maybe your industry's willingness to adopt Gen AI?
Yeah, certainly, right? I think you would not use something that you do not know the risk, right? I think it's just a universal rules, right? The more that you know about a certain risk, and then you could actually potentially either you want to guardrail it or you want to actually have a mitigation plan to actually minimize the risk. I think that transparency and the risk mitigation, the strategy, that would actually definitely increase the adoption rate within the industry. So I can speak from the healthcare space. This is where we are highly excited, right? I mean, of course, as you know, healthcare is the most risk-averse industry. You can just imagine that your mom, your dad step into the hospital. You want the best doctor to make the best decision, and everyone wants that. So because of that, sometimes doctor tends to be the risk-averse person who say no to everyone. I'm sure Chris has actually heard Kurt Langlot says, which is a radiologist, currently the vice provost in Stanford, says this phrase: the radiologists who actually do not use AI will be replaced by those who do. Right. So I think this is one of the very famous awakening statement for the healthcare to know we should actually definitely move on together with large language models and, like what Andy just said, put a very good risk mitigation strategy as while we're actually using it. Yeah.
I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to finish off with one specific question to Gagandeep and then maybe one wrap up from everyone. The specific question for you, Gagandeep, is I wasn't there for your session, but I did read up a little bit on that concept of mathematics. What is the state of the science there? I mean, both at the level of giving guarantees at the model level, but also do those guarantees work if the model has to deal with real world things like data, poor data quality, or system going down between two calls, etc. But maybe answer those two separately. At the model level, how good is the state of the art on mathematical guarantees?
We are just getting started. So there's a lot of work in kind of empirical observations and measurements based on benchmarking or creating jailbreaks and so on, but not so much on formal guarantees. And one of the problems is that you want to have a formal definition of the property you want. And for the case of LLMs, that's not so trivial as is the case for vision models we have been doing for the last 5-6 years, right? So first task is to define these things formally, and then they need to be defined in a way that we can build algorithms that can then compute these probabilities, right? So we are just getting
specifically
started.
but I wonder whether that can be ever done at a general purpose model level, or whether it's necessarily, the model might be general purpose, but only in a specific context you can give a guarantee around what it can do. I don't know. I mean, I'm not in that research. But.
I would say that this would be true because in general, it is very hard to like think of all the scenarios and formalize them. An argument can be made that if you could actually formally in some formula specify all the safe behavior, why would you use deep learning in the first place?
Exactly.
Right?
Fair point.
I mean, this isn't answering large language models, but one of the places where neural networks are now being used and their formal safety is being guaranteed is actually next generation collision avoidance between airplanes. The ACAS system, the new generation of it, Michael Kokendorfer, has developed a neural net-based system which has been extensively formally verified. And the neural net is actually superior because of its compactness, which is actually an interesting reason for choosing a neural net over some other technology.
Yeah. But again, that's a narrow AI.
That's a narrow AI.
Okay, with that in mind, I'm just going to do one last question. Maybe each of the folks on my right side, if there's one thing you could ask from the research academia community to help you, what would that be? And then for this side, what would be helpful for you to help them better?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. And I think the only one request we have from my side would be, when can we guarantee the mathematical guarantees? Yeah, I think we really need that. I do have a few other examples which the difficulty is in the balance between determinism and having randomness in it, and having those mathematical guarantees in place will really help us tread the middle line. Yeah.
And
so maybe just share my viewpoint first. I think changes will no longer be as linear as last time, right? Especially with the rise of agents in this area, right? It'll be very complex. So like my example of the car, now everybody can build their own car, taking a wheel from here, agent A, agent B plus, and they start moving along. Today's safety is really, as a whole unit, that's a safety. But we are moving along with multiple pieces at the same time. How do we then measure it as a whole, not just on one item? Because they have to be different in order to do different tasks as well, right? Then how do we, I don't think there's a straightforward way to measure safety when you put all the different agents that's supposed to do different things. Like I said, can be a medical agent calling a medical clinical ops agent that's called a administrative agent. All add together, there are different risk profiles. But when you add together, how do we know it's safe?
Fair
Right?
enough.
So I think that's the question I have.
Daniel, your one ask.
One ask, wow, I need an AI investment tool to make myself richer. No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah.
Very wise.
So like I said, I'm sure everyone here's one. Yeah, I think like one thing that I really wish that, at least from a healthcare space, is let's not just look at the model safety, but actually be more holistic when you look at safety. Maybe take into a domain safety in addition to the technical safety. And then I'm sure the ethical safety, when you actually put into the domain and the technical, it would actually be a bit more comprehensive and holistic. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So two thoughts. I mean, with due respect, I think a lot of the time, formal guarantees just aren't going to be possible and aren't actually worth seeking. I mean, like your comment on banking was a good one of, that you have to deal with probabilities. I mean, I think a lot of the time that's true in the medical world as well. We just don't know for sure what's going to happen. You have to deal with probabilities. So it seems like really what you want is something that is maybe only empirically, but clearly statistically better, that you have on average much better outcomes, and you have some kind of a bound that is not sometimes going to really go off the rails and do something completely crazy that you couldn't defend. Now that seems perhaps a better thing to aim for. And so they're not doing something completely crazy. I mean, a topic we didn't talk about here that I think does transfer immediately from some of the more academic discussion to any of these practical contexts is this idea is that hallucinations of large language models making stuff up that isn't true. I mean, that's clearly profoundly important for any medical context. And so that's a sort of a very direct place in which some of the recent academic research is very relevant.
Okay. Now I have two. Yeah, but one medical application I can tell you, like we were discussing with folks in Microsoft India. So what they have built is like for very remote villages where they cannot have doctors readily available, some kind of app where they can, the patients, the villagers, they can ask some very simple question and then it should just give what is the medicine for common cold or whatever. Now, the issue is that in India, there are so many languages and then people mix and match these languages in all sorts of ways. So it's like not even like English, people speak in English, which is combination of Hindi and English. So now these developers are worried what if the response that works usually would not work if I were to ask the same question in some weird combination of Hindi and English text, right? So that's an example where like those guys, they are worried in kind of like calculating the risk where the model is going to give something wrong or dangerous when I just like pose the question in some like, change. So I think from the industry, you know, like for us, I think it's always good to work because I myself see as kind of like, I'm not like a core AI person that only does like AI. So I see ourselves as somebody that works with stakeholders. And we have worked in different domains, not only like natural language processing, but we have worked in finance, systems, networking, whatever you can think of. So we like to work with the domain stakeholders, see what their main considerations are, and then try to think of what threats they think of their system and try to give some, well, if it's possible, give formal guarantees on what kind of risk they can have so that they can make.
So your ask is the reverse or the mirror image, which is, they said, Daniel said, think a bit more about the domain. Yeah. And you're saying, actually, join us in helping.
I think many of the decisions does depend upon the domain experts, right? If I come here and I say that, oh, I give you probability 0.75 and it's good, I don't think I'm in a good position to make that decision. I think it needs to come from the domain holders.
Last word to you.
Right. So today, I think this panel inspired me a lot regarding, let's say, hallucination risks. Because previously, my understanding about hallucination is, is more like, say something bad about, or say something wrong about, let's say, geography, history. But actually, indeed, so different application scenario, different domains. So many of different risk factors actually can weigh differently and actually play different factors. So I guess to long term for making models safe, I guess academic industry need probably have more collaborations or build some general platform for each other to easily communicate with each other. And then probably in the end, many of the new things or the real defenses or real world defenses that is somehow quite effective, but not necessarily formal guaranteed, but quite effective can be developed.
Thank you. I know it's been a long day, so with that, we'll finish for today. And I think the only thing is, I mean, if there are questions, I don't know if we have time, but it's been a very long day anyway. There is a question. But just to summarize, and my one takeaway is maybe next time it's a large model and large systems safety workshop rather than just large models. Sorry, we have one question, so maybe somebody can give the microphone. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is James Ong from Artificial Intelligence International Institute. First of all, I want to say the person who put together this panel is very courageous. Second, I would say, Shamit, your job is really very tough. We have one group of researchers who speak one languages, the industry application speak another languages, right? So because, before I get to my serious question, because there are so many different types of AI technology, right? Large language model, traditional. There's such wide range of users being affected right now, from end user, elderly, to military use, right? National security. There's so many different industry domain There's so many different type of application. There's so many different political systems who make decision. And there are different culture as well because value matters in the language model and different languages and value. So I have a very serious question because I think that this panel has one great benefit. It reflects the humanity problem we face in AI right now because this panel kind of reflects how difficult the problem is and it's not easy, right? So the serious question I ask of you is individually as human, right? Ultimately, the leaders matter, right? Whether is it our political leader, our business leader. Of course, in the case of US, you'll be your president. In Singapore, you'll be your prime minister, right? So if there is one wish you wish your leader would know today, right? That you wish to convey to them to make the right decision, just one, what would it be? Regardless of whether you are researchers or whether you are industry application people. Thank you.
I'm going to take volunteers rather than making everybody answer. Anybody wants to take it? Go ahead.
As the American representative or something. I think the problems we have aren't really AI problems. I think our leader doesn't yet understand that the American economy has moved into a services economy rather than being mainly about making widgets.
Anybody here wants to volunteer? Maybe I'll volunteer an answer. I think if I was to ask for any country's leaders, and specifically on AI, it would be to recognize that it's not wise to think of AI risk in isolation. It is always important to think of it in the context of where it will be applied. I think if frankly any country has the ability to do that, it's probably ours. We probably have the most clued in leaders in this space. So anyway, here's hoping to that. It's been a long day, unless there are any other urgent questions. Thank you very much for even just being here. It's very long. I hope you found this last discussion useful. Thank you.